Awakened Living is a 21st century movement for people who consider themselves spiritual but not religious, who have a deep hunger for connected community and a divine impulse for personal and global transformation. Our mission is to encourage and inspire the awakening of human consciousness. Good evening and welcome to Awakened Living Television. My name is TJ Woodward. I'm the Minister and Spiritual Director of Awakened Living in San Francisco. I'm really excited about this evening. We're having Dr. Adriana Popescu back for part 2 of our conversation about the magic of creation. As is often the case, we were really in the middle of a conversation last week on the show, and our time came to an end. So I'm going to get right back into the conversation with Dr. Popescu, but first I'm going to have her introduce herself to you if you didn't tune in last week. So welcome to the show again.
Hi TJ, it's great to be back.
It's our third time now on the show.
Yeah.
I'm really excited about continuing this conversation. I had a couple things that felt left a little bit open.
Sure.
So we'll get into that. But first, why don't you take a few minutes to reintroduce yourself to our viewers and tell us a little bit about your work and
Sure.
what you do.
Yeah, so my name is Adriana Popescu. I'm a licensed clinical psychologist. I've been working over 20 years in this field. My private practice specializes in using the tools of energy psychology to help people overcome the barriers that are keeping them from creating the life they desire.
Wow, great, concise and to the point, and I love it. And
I want to have as much time as we can to keep talking about the magic of creation.
The magic of creation, yes. And again, I said this in the last show, but I just want to say that I know some people who have met with you individually and you've seen in your practice and their lives have really been transformed.
Absolutely.
So you're doing great work, and I know that you know that, but it's always good to know again, because
it's important to acknowledge what you're creating. So often, I think even with the process of creation, some of us are these obsessive compulsive creators. We don't even take the time to acknowledge what it is we have created before we're on to the next thing. And I think it's really important to make a note of that. Not only do you have to acknowledge what you've created that's turned out great, you also have to acknowledge what you created that maybe didn't turn out so well, and or didn't turn out as how you had expected, and ask some questions around that. Well, what did I do there? With my business, when I stopped, and this is going to lead us, I think, into one of those points. Okay. My business last year, when I was just doing status quo, what I realized in retrospect, at the time I didn't realize it, was that I wasn't continuing to create it. I wasn't feeding it. It was like a plant that you don't give enough water to, and it was starting to wither. I was actually starting to lose clients, and I was losing money. And I started asking questions finally, well, what is this? What am I creating here? Well, I'm not creating. I'm creating the death of my business. I'm not invested in it. I'm not involved in it. I'm not asking questions anymore. So one of the things that I thought it was really important to follow up with from last week was this idea that you constantly have to be in that question of creation. What is it when you wake up in the morning? What does my business require of me today? What could I create today for my business? Or what can I create for my life? What can I create that's fun for me? What can I create that would make me more money right away? Just to constantly be in that question, because otherwise, again, like we talked about last week, your creations have a consciousness, a life of their own. They require stuff to keep them going. You don't just make it and then leave it. Right? That's a good way to kill it. So you want to keep asking questions. What does this need to keep growing? What can I do? What's the one thing I could do today that would contribute to my business growing? And then you might get an awareness like, oh, I need to make a phone call, or I need to send out an email, or I need to be here today for some reason. And when you're there, you run into someone or you have an aha idea. Again, you don't know how or when it's going to show up.
Wow. So a couple of things really stood out. One is that this idea of continuing to have it grow, and then just the simple recognition that we can pause and have some gratitude too, because a year ago when you and I were here on this show, my life was in a very different place, and I very intentionally recreated my life, and here we are a year later, and absolutely every single thing that I was desiring back then or creating back then is now manifest in my life.
Right.
And then a tendency could be then at that point to say, okay, now I'm here, and just start coasting.
Right.
And so in my own process, it's okay. This is really great. Take some time with gratitude, and then what's next?
Right.
And I love the conversation about seeing the business or whatever it is you're creating as its own entity.
Yes.
And then asking what it wants. And I'm wondering if you could speak a little bit more about that.
Yeah, it's like that question I was saying, what does my business require of me? It's like, where would my business like to be? What would it like to be? What name would it like to have? I mean, really dialoguing with it. I'm creating, right now I've started teaching classes again, and I got this, awareness. I have different classes I can teach within Access Consciousness, but the one that I started really percolating for me was this talk to the entities. Because apparently I came to find in the last couple of years, one of the weirder things is that I have a capacity to communicate with spirit. And so I've been getting this training in the last couple of years around this. And I'm now a facilitator of the Talk to the Entities classes, and I'm able to teach those. So the energy started kind of bubbling up around that. The other classes, not so much. So I started asking questions like, okay, well, is now the time to create a class? And I got a yes, because a long time ago in the first show I had with you, remember, whatever's true for you will feel lighter, expansive. Whatever's not true for you will feel heavy. So the energy was feeling really light, like now is the time to create something. So I started asking, well, when? This month, next month, and I came up with July. So, okay, July, and when in July, and you keep kind of getting a sense, keep asking those questions and follow the lightness of the energy. I ended up on the weekend of the 25th or something. Well, then I started looking at, would this class like a co-facilitator? And I got a yes. And then synchronistically, a friend of mine from the facilitators class calls me and says, hey, do you want to teach a class together? I think it would be really fun for that, right? So then the pieces start coming together. Then we have to look at location. Where would the class like to be, right? Would it like to be in San Francisco? Would it like to be in Marin? We had these different options. People were offering spaces to us. San Francisco, so we got on and we just kept following the energy, and the energy is really light, and we kept asking who can contribute to this. And so now people are promoting us, just spontaneously, or having us do stuff in classes where we're getting acknowledged for the work that we do, and it's piquing an interest, and it's just sort of like magically all coming together in this very easeful way, because we're asking questions and we're not getting attached to how it's supposed to look or what's supposed to be created.
Yeah, and one thing that I know we might have referenced either last week on the show or just now is that just because my answer is something right now doesn't mean that's going to be the answer in a week or a day or even 20 minutes from now.
Right.
So how do we stay current with asking and living in those questions?
You keep asking. So I was doing a different class, a bars class, a little while back, and I had done all this stuff, and I noticed that the energy, there were only a couple people had signed up. So then I asked the question, well, what is the energy of this class right now? And I got this kind of like flat energy. And then I asked the next question, well, what is the energy that this class would like to be? And it was this, like, again, bubbly, kind of expansive. And then I said, okay, whatever's not allowing that to occur, I destroy and uncreate it. And there's a clearing. This is one of the tools of access. There's a clearing I can do for that, right? And then what energy, space, and consciousness can I and my body be to create or contribute that lightness, that bubbliness, whatever it is, to the class, okay? And funny thing, the very next day, someone else signed up. Okay. And then again, as we're getting closer to the time of the actual class, I'm noticing it's staying small. So I asked the class, how big does this class desire to be? And I got 2 people. So the third person mysteriously dropped out. The class was only 2 people. I had to let go of my attachment I might have had to, I wanted it to be bigger, or I wanted it to make more money, or whatever. But there was a magic that happened between those 2 people that might not have occurred had I had other energies in there, other people in there. So again, you don't know how or when it's going to show up, but whatever got shifted in their world from that class, of course, is going to have that ripple effect. It's going to change other people in their lives, and you have this sort of domino thing that happens. So you never know how it's going to show up or when or any of that. So constantly asking the questions, what is the energy of it now? What does it desire to be? What's getting in the way? What can I do next? With no attachment of an agenda.
2 things came up for me. One is just a really brief story that I want to share with you. Awakened Living, we now have a Sunday morning event, and one Sunday morning, no one showed up. And just days before, I had talked with someone that represents musicians and speakers and authors, and he said the one thing he says to everyone is to be in your truth no matter how many people are in your audience. It's not about that. In his language, it was give it your all. So
Right.
I actually started the event with no one in the room. I did the opening welcome. I did the meditation. I started my talk. One person walked in and about 20 minutes after the hour. Now, see, if I would have said, okay, I need to go home, I trusted that I needed to be there doing that, regardless of, talk about calling in the entities. I'm like, there are plenty of entities in this room that I can have this process with.
Absolutely.
And then she came in and we had this incredibly powerful conversation that was really vulnerable. And then 20 minutes after that, so 40 minutes after the hour, a third person walked in, and the three of us had one of the most powerful Sunday mornings at Awakened Living ever.
Yeah.
And part of it was my commitment to staying with that and staying in that truth and continuing, even though everything in the outer realm appeared that I could have just gone home.
Exactly. And so the two things that come up for me around that is, one, how wonderful that you were able to follow that energy and the knowing. The more you do this, the more you like play with asking questions and following the energy, the more intuitive and automatic it becomes. The questions are just like training wheels, like teaching you how to do this. But eventually you just know. Like with the coaching program, I just had this awareness. I was in a workshop a couple of weeks ago to ask this woman I know to lunch. She was also in the class. We ended up talking. We ended up having a great lunch. She was asking me a lot about my business. And then we came back to the classroom and she's like, well, how would you feel about me being your first coaching client? Out of nowhere. When I had been a while back going, how am I ever going to advertise, or how am I going to promote this coaching how am I ever going to get the people I desire to have in this program?
Yes.
It fell in my lap. Why? Because I had this little feather whisper touch that said, ask that woman to lunch.
Yep.
So you never know. You just have to start to trust the knowing and follow the energy and see where it leads you. Even if it leads in a quote unquote, wrong turn. Like you might have easily have gone into, well, what's wrong with me that no one showed up for the group that day?
Totally.
Right? But instead of doing that, you just trusted what's right about this I'm not getting, which is a great question to ask.
Yes.
What's right about this I'm not getting, and just follow that, right?
Yeah. And to be completely transparent, I did have a moment of what's wrong that no one was here. And I quickly caught myself because I know the teaching and I know the practice is not to live in that, but to move it into a question. And the question became then, what else is possible? What am I? And my question at that moment was, who am I here to be and what am I here to do?
That's right.
And it was so clear for me, I'm here to do this, regardless of what it looks like on the outside. I'd like to switch gears a little bit and share a personal story, and then that might lead into a conversation. So what happens when we have the intuition, but there's something, and then we started talking about this last week, there's a perceived block that keeps it from happening.
Right.
So like right now I'm in the process of writing my book, and I've been writing it. The intuition came about 3 or 4 years ago, and very specific. And that idea sat in only its idea form for 2 years. And then once I got really clear about the book, people showed up to support it. So about a month ago, 1, 2, 3 different people mentioned to me, 3 separate occasions said, take quotes from the book, make these, memes that you put out there, start putting your name out there with your quotes on them. And it's so clear. I had that intuition and 3 other people told me, I haven't taken the action yet.
Right.
So what would you say? What would you do if I was coming to you and saying, how do I get that into the process of actually creating that?
Right. So one is, what is it that you think the memes are going to create? So get beyond, because you've maybe come to a conclusion. So it's a question like, is this a conclusion or is this actually the direction to go in? So you might ask a question, am I coming to a conclusion about what it is that I'm trying to create here, right? And what is it that I'm trying to create here? The other thing you could ask is now the time? Because you might have an awareness that doing that could really be a contribution to the project, but maybe now is not the time. So you would keep asking, is now the time? Is now the time? Until it feels light, then that's the time to implement it.
Thank you for that, because when in the process of the book itself, that I had that knowing, and I kept saying, I know the book is happening, and I know it doesn't feel like it's time. And thank you for that, because that's a great awareness. It probably... Is that true? Yeah, it feels like the same thing.
Yeah.
Like it's a knowing, and then when the time is right, I'll know.
Exactly.
So do I just...
You just keep asking the question. is now the time. Is today the day?
Is today the day?
You know, like if you're asking in the morning, what does my business require of me? You could ask, what is the book requiring of me today? And you might just get that awareness. Today's the day to put those memes out there.
Yeah.
Okay. Just keep asking the questions. Keep following the energy.
Okay. In the spirit of following the energy, I want to ask, is there something that felt that we didn't quite get to last week or even now that you want to continue the conversation with?
Yeah, because I think that the process of creation is a complex one. And a lot of times I think people take it upon themselves to take on all aspects of creation. So it's really important to know what your strengths are. Like, one way of looking at it, again, from access consciousness would be there are people who are great generators, other people who are creators, other people who are the institutors, okay? So the generators are the brainstorm, the people, the idea people. I have 1,001 ideas. But those people aren't always the best at putting those ideas out there into form. Yeah. So you've got the generations process, you know, the brainstorming, the creation process, which is literally bringing into form the ideas. So when you and I met before the show and we were talking about ideas, now we're actually creating them through the show. And then the implementation, which is more like the maintenance. Okay, so now what happens? We record the show. Somebody's got to put it on TV. Somebody has to put it on YouTube. Like, there's that instituting aspect. And not everyone is going to have strengths in all three areas. You might be a great institutor. You're really great at making things happen, but you don't really have the ideas, right? Or the other way around. So identifying what your strengths are, and wherever you're not as strong, getting someone else to support you with whatever it is they're good at, okay? Yeah. So as you do those energy pulls that we did last week, you could also pull to you all of the creators, all of the generators, all the institutors who can support you in your process. There's another sort of categorization way to look at this, which is creators, movers, and connectors. Okay, so this is particularly around creating a project, a business, something you're wanting to kind of put out there. So again, you need to have the ideas, the creators, and then you need the movers. So that was when I was asking you, is now the time? A mover is somebody who's really got their finger on the pulse. What's the demand? What's out there? You know, what do people want right now? What do they need? Because you may have a great idea for a book, but now might not be the time to put it out there. But a year from now, boom, it'll be gangbusters, right? So they kind of have that awareness of like when the timing is and what's needed. And then the connectors are your networkers. Like, hey, I know someone who knows someone who this, that, and the other. Again, finding out what your strengths are. Like, I'm a good connector. I'm not so great at, you know, creation sometimes, right? Whatever it is. And then again, getting people to support you in those areas that you're not as strong in.
So it's a big piece of it is getting really clear on who you are in that, and then calling in the energy or really the invite for people to come support this project.
Exactly.
So what right now, what are you creating right now? I know you're talking about the classes, but is there anything else you want to share with us that you're in the process of creating right now, if you're willing to share a personal experience about this process?
Sure. I mean, I'm creating my business. That's kind of been my focus lately, right? I'm creating a coaching program, and I talked a little bit last week about how it really came from like different pieces, finally sort of congealed together, and I'm still in question, and I'm still co-creating. You know, my first coaching client is going to help give me more sort of ideas as to what I want to create. In my personal life, I'm creating relationships with people that are more supportive and expansive and light and playful and fun, because I'm asking for it. You know, who are the people that would be fun for me to play with? What, how much more enjoyment and caring and nurturing could I have? Who can contribute to that? With the business, another question I ask is, who are the people that could benefit from my services? That was one question that I felt really contributed to bringing this person into the coaching program. So it's stuff like that, just constantly asking the questions, following the energy, letting go of my attachments to how I think it's supposed to go. A lot of what's coming up around the business stuff is like the marketing aspect. And this reality says, you know, you have to do things a certain way. Like you have to get videos out there and you have to promote yourself this way. And I have some resistance around that, right? And like, well, what would it be like for me to create outside of that box? What if I could just put the energy out there of what I'm desiring to create and actually attract it to me? And what if it doesn't look like the conventional way? And sometimes it might. I might be, you know, I have hired a marketer to help me with some stuff. You know, it's like finding that sort of balance between what we know can work in this reality and what else is possible beyond that is really sort of this area I'm playing with right now, and just being very present with my own resistances and my own ideas and my own conclusions I want to come to, and surrendering all of it and trusting that the universe is going to bring me what it is that I'm asking for.
Yeah, absolutely. And the phrase that comes to mind partially in this is power versus force.
Yeah,
Like
absolutely.
when I'm really, this is the way I need to have all those videos out, and I need to hire this, and I need to do this kind of marketing. And this is something really different in this process. And like you said, it may include that the time may be right at some point to make a video, or the time might be right to do a particular type of marketing. So what a wonderful process to be in.
It's been magical. It's been so fun.
Yeah. And I love that you brought it into relationships too, because we've talked primarily around business or creating some sort of project.
Yeah.
But wow, when people use this in their life in terms of what kind of relationships we want to create, found the energy around that.
Absolutely.
And calling that energy in transformative.
And creating your body, creating your health, creating your home, your family life. I mean, the tools can be used across any domain of your life, right? We were just being more sort of pragmatic and concrete, but everything in my life has changed with these tools. It's amazing, and I'm still in the question: and how does it get even better? And what else is possible even beyond this?
Which brings us back, I don't know if you remember, probably you do, but last year our topic was, what else is possible?
Yeah.
Right. How does it get even better than this?
And my life, even in a year, has transformed just in these incredible ways. And I'm still open to the other possibilities. What's even beyond my wildest imagination that I could create?
Yeah. So I know you may not believe this. We only have about 3 minutes left.
Wow.
So is there anything that we haven't brought into this conversation that feels like you'd want to bring it forward now, or anything that we haven't talked about?
Well, I think it's important to, we're talking about the questions in creating, and, we haven't talked a whole lot about the obstacles. It's really important to identify the obstacles that keep you from being willing to receive that what you would like to create, because the universe is waiting to gift it to you, but you might have some barriers up. You might have some core limiting beliefs like, I'm not good enough, I don't deserve this, it's not possible for me, and those have to be addressed in order for you to actually be willing to receive. So again, without getting into too many of the specifics, lots of tools for working with this. I mean, I'm even thinking everything from like the Byron Katie stuff to, her work, to the NET, to the EFT, Be Set Free Fast. I love that tool. I give it to all of my clients. Access consciousness. There's all these different tools for clearing out those negative thoughts and feelings or traumas or memories, whatever it is that might be getting in the way. And that's actually the work that I'm doing with my clients. Like once we've identified the targets and we're doing all these questions, then notice where's the resistance. If things are not showing up, well, what is that? What's getting in the way?
Wow. And a few things came up, so I'm just going to voice them. One is looking forward to your book when it happens,
whenever that is,
and that maybe I don't know if you experienced it this way, but it may be a little bit more structure around what it is that you might be doing. That it is a multi-step, and I know you're clear about that, but to be able to identify that to clients, that it's this multi-step process. Once we get clear about this, we call that energy, and then what are the blocks and what are the tools to
and that there's stages of this process, right? It's the generation, the creation, the implementing, the maintaining. All along the way, you have to stay present and involved with all of it.
Yes.
And even the end of a creation, like when is it time to close a business or end a project, right? Having questions around that as well.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. This has been so much fun.
And fast.
Yeah.
I love that when we're in conversation. Hours can go by. So in closing, please tell our viewers how to find you.
Sure.
Because I know that you're doing great work. And I just want to say to the viewers, absolutely. The greatest gift you can give yourself is a session with Adriana. I really mean that.
Thank you. So I have a website, adrianapopescu.org. I'm also on LinkedIn, I'm on Facebook, and I have a facilitators page at accessconsciousness.com.
Well, thank you so much, and thank you, viewers, for tuning in and really being engaged in this process, because I know what we're committed to doing and who we are committed to being at Awakened Living is really calling in the energy of people that are really doing this deep work, if we call it deep work, but if we call it work at all, but this transformation that's happening through a process of seeing the world in a different way, using these tools to access different parts of our consciousness to really create the lives that we're looking to live. This is not, I will often say that Awakened Living isn't necessarily feel-good spirituality. We're not here to give you a quick answer, but really to live deeply in the question, what else is possible? What is needed now? Really, really living in a question and recognizing that our mind may want to collapse in on a particular idea, but when I open up to living in that question, infinite potentiality exists. So please join us for one of our upcoming events at Awakened Living. You can find us online at awakenedlivingsf.org. Thank you so much for tuning in, and good night.